I've been reading these books by Knut Hamsun, who's a Norwegian writer, who wrote a few books about people who were kind of living out in the wilderness and were maybe a bit socially dysfunctional. And so I went to the north of Norway, sort of drove around and asked people if they knew anybody who lived on their own in the middle of a forest. And I was there for about a month. I didn't find anyone. So I came back to Britain and was telling my friend this story, and he told me about Jake. He said, "Oh, maybe you should visit this guy that I used to live near in Scotland." And he still had his number. Jake has a telephone because he lives in the middle of it's a forestry commission forest. Forestry commission is a bit like your. It's not like national parks. They're
the national forest.
Yeah. So where they forest trees for paper and stuff like that.
Oh, that's different then.
So he has a telephone. So yeah, I called him up and asked him if I could visit, and he's extremely brief on the phone. He doesn't like talking on the phone. So I just spoke to him saying, "Oh, I really want to come up and visit. You're a friend of a friend," and he just said, "Yep, come on up, bye." It was really quick. So he didn't even give me his address or anything. So I got his address from his friend, and went to visit. The first time was in 2005, and just went for a week and shot a few rolls of film, and didn't really know what the film would be, but was just shooting what I thought was interesting and recording sounds separately, and then went home and edited it into this 7-minute film, and I thought it was nice, but it was too short. So then I asked him if I could go back in the winter. So then, I went back and shot another 10 rolls or something of film, so that ended up as this 15-minute film called This Is My Land, which is much more kind of observational, and very fragmentary, quicker, and but after that, Jake really liked the film, and we kept in touch, and I went to visit him a few more times, and I made another film which was like a road movie around Britain, which he figures in, and then I got this opportunity to make a longer film. I got offered a bit more money, and I thought it'd be really nice to go back to him and be able to, to really kind of spend more time with him and actually think more about his relationship with time, and to be able to have the luxury of really showing some elongated moments of his life, and but at the same time, I didn't want it to just be observational. I knew I wanted to like construct things, and because we were friends, I knew that he would trust me, and like that would be something that would be possible to do. Well, and if I'd gone to somebody new, it would have been a much more complicated question, I think.
Well, what did it take for you to gain his trust, shall we say?
Lots of whiskey. Just, I spent a lot of time with it. When I first made the first film, I was filming very little time compared to the amount of time I was there, and I help him out a lot. A lot of his life revolves around chopping trees and chopping them up and then moving them around his sort of buildings. He has a kind of system because his whole life, you know, there's no electricity or anything like that. So like the house revolves around the wood stove, and that, you know, that's his source of heating and cooking and water and etc. So, you know, I'd help him out with all of that and practical jobs. So there's an exchange of labor, which helps, and you know, just like sitting by the fire and talking, and yeah. So by the time you know, I'd known him 5 years already when it came to making this film, and had visited him not just as a filmmaker, but as a friend. I'd gone there and just stayed, and you know, we'd done stuff, and yeah. So by the time I got to this one, when I said, "Oh, I want to make a much longer film. I want to make like a feature film," he was super excited and said, "Yeah, make me a star." Which was really nice, you know, because he's a guy who lives in the middle of a forest, and you know, you might not necessarily expect that kind of response. And you know, he really took it on, and is very, you know, by that time he's much more comfortable with me in the camera, and you know, so a lot of it is, you know, it's kind of course, partly based on him. You know, it's his space, it's him, but you know, a lot of the scenes and the shots are constructed, they're set up, they're directed. You know, I'm telling him when to move into the frame and move out of the frame and all of that stuff. And there's, you know, there's multiple takes of some things, and he was very comfortable with that and very involved and you know, professional. I think he's a good actor.
In what way did your interests in merging, say, the observational and the directed, and when you decided that you wanted to also distill or extend this character portrait with, you know, visions of your own, shall we say, how did that come into your filmmaking? And
well, I think it had been growing in some of the previous short films that I'd made. So the first film I made with him was not like that at all. It was much more closer to an idea of documentary, I guess. But then I made a series of films about other folk living off in the wilderness, and increasingly they became a bit more less. Yeah, very much less involved in trying to make an accurate portrait of somebody, and more about that person being a kind of catalyst for whatever the film was going to be. So, like, my experience there, because usually I'd make repeated visits as well, which was important, because so the first visit was about the kind of experience of being there, and then with the reflection on that first visit and that first bit of filming, the films would then kind of move maybe in other directions depending on how you know, the ideas that I got from being there. So I made a film called Our Liberty, which is about a family that live in the Highlands of Scotland. So the first visit, I'm filming everything that's going on, but then when I looked at the footage, I felt like I wanted to make it seem more kind of fictionalized, and like get rid of the parents altogether, so it's just the children. So it's, you know, it's not like a kind of outright fiction where I'm scripting things, but it's more about decisions about where you point the camera and how much you set things up, and then how you edit these things. So I was thinking about it already when I started thinking about this film, was that I didn't want to make like a straightforward documentary, that it was going to be a film about someone, you know, very much like Jake, but not exactly him, because to me that was like an impossible idea to make an accurate portrait in a way that that I wanted it to be something else. That what you see on the screen is its own thing, rather than a representation of something.
I mean, to me, there's elements of other choices in your filmmaking, which, I mean, from shooting it in anamorphic to, well, there's a little bit, but is there much sync sound in the film at all? I mean, there's a couple of scenes, of course, where we see, but
it kind of
the
moves.
nature.
It moves in and out, But yeah, there's a lot of non-sync.
I mean, you're creating a very specific landscape sound as well, of course.
Yeah. I mean, I think about those things and how the sound plays with and against the image.
Why is the anamorphic part of your vision? I mean, it was for this, and we showed All Liberty, I believe, at Filmforum, and had.
You did, yeah.
Unsuccessfully, I should say.
Yeah, it looked terrible, but
It was hard to find a 16 anamorphic lens in Los Angeles.
I'd forgotten about that. Thanks.
I shouldn't have brought it up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was one way of like moving it away from an idea of documentary, because I don't think it's not really a documentary format or ratio. It's the ratio of the landscape, the epic, the Western, or sci-fi. It's not really aligned with kind of factual filmmaking, I don't think. So, and I also wanted to the landscape, when I decided that it was going to be a film just with him, because he's somebody who actually does like other people and does have visitors. But I wanted to make a film, it was a kind of challenge that I set myself, was to make a film just with him. And so the other kind of character is the landscape in a way. So, I felt like that format works really well. It also, also his house, also like being able to set up shots and allow, I'm directing him, but also allow him more movement within the frame, because his movements can be quite erratic. So.
Here, let's see, from all of you, questions, thoughts, responses. Let me see. Show of hands, because you're all backlit in a really lovely manner. Yes, there.
Now that you spend a lot of time with him, what do you think motivates him to live sort of semi-off the grid the way he does?
What do you think motivates him to live semi-off the grid?
I think, he told me that the reason why he moved out there in the first place was because he didn't want to pay a landlord rent, which seemed like a fairly sensible idea. And so the way he went about that was he worked as a merchant seaman for 2 years, hence the title. He worked for as long as it took him to save enough money to buy this place, which was completely kind of run down and barren when he bought it. And even though he's he does visit towns, and like I say, he's not a misanthrope at all. Extremely friendly, but I think the kind of being in nature and having that space and that freedom always kind of overrides the need to be with people and or be surrounded by people. And a lot of his friends come and stay with him, especially there's a couple of guys, both called Bob, who come and visit. Both terrible, like, addicts who, they come from these sort of deprived Scottish towns that have had their sort of fishing industry taken away, and these towns turn into like like drug dens. So they come and sort of dry out at Jake's.
It seems like there's no story, but actually what you're saying now is there actually is a story. In other words, you actually constructed a fiction for us that isn't truthful. Is that correct?
That's pretty correct. I mean,
it seems so truthful. I mean, it seems
well, that's why that's why I think he's a very good actor. Because we always talked about it as someone, he's acting himself, but he's like acting an exaggeration of certain parts of his character. It's not that far from the truth. He does spend quite a bit of time like this in a very self-sustained kind of way. But yeah, it was a very deliberate and fictional decision to like remove all those other people and remove his trips to the town and his trips to see his mom, and he even occasionally works as a stand-in science teacher at the local school, which must be amazing. And actually, maybe I'll make another film which completely like turns this one on its head and shows all of that. Because I'd like to get the Bobs in, and I'd like to get the because he says he never writes anything on the chalkboard. It's all practical experiments with these kids, which must be just great. With like pints of Guinness and stuff. I don't know.
Could you just say maybe a little about what your issue is with documentary?
Well, I guess it's a kind of suspicion in the idea that that documentaries they're able to tell the truth. It always seems like a problematic idea that when you're presented with something called a documentary, that this information is all truthful, but of course it's not. They're very manipulative in the same way that a fiction film would be. There's so many decisions made in making a documentary which are kind of suspect, and so I guess I just prefer to like somehow try to make it clear that I'm not trying to impart information, like truthful information. I mean, there's another kind of truth happening, I think, that moves beyond this kind of factual truth.
I mean, I think for me, there's like, the film can have a truth, although it's sort of in the ultimately just whether the individual viewer decides whether what you have accumulated it does seem to be an accurate or truthful aspect of some aspect of the world or human.
There's some pretty early, I mean, it starts off as like day to day, him doing his ablutions, and everything else that he would normally do. But then pretty early on, there's a scene where there's a kind of floating caravan, which I think, is a pointer that, we're moving into another kind of space, and that you should question everything that you're looking at. Sometimes it's easy to forget that there's a hand behind this thing that you're watching. And also, just the very nature of a lot of the places that I enjoy filming, like this place, and Jake's life, and just being there is a very physical experience. It's physical, and you get dirty, and it's not a sterile environment. It's one that's really rich and kind of palpable in some kind of elemental way. It's you feel the elements and the water and it's constant kind of drizzle of rain and snow and so hand processing the film is one way of also kind of mirroring that, and getting closer to that experience. I think of making the film itself, the material of the film, kind of more tangible and present and and allowing in that processing, some of the dirt to remain and the imperfections. I'm very excited about the accidents that happen when you're doing that. I'm not able to watch it back straight away. I do a bunch of filming when I'm there, and then I go home, and then it takes another couple of weeks to process it all, and then when you finally look at it, first like this, and then when you have it digitized, and they're really exciting kind of moments, and you see these kind of accidents and things that you never expected, which I think is all part of, really important part of my process, and
Ignoring the levitating trailer shot, when you're out there filming, is it most of the time just you? Do you have a crew that accompanies you in any way?
Chu is my sound recordist, so she was there pretty much all the time. I made there was 5 trips over the year, and she came on 4 of them. And each one was like a couple of weeks. We stayed a couple of weeks each time. One time was 3 weeks.
Except that he's just going to go to the past.
He's going to go to the
To
past.
the past, instantly. He's never in the present. It goes right, it switches right back. So,
That's not. That's one. I guess that's one perception. Not mine.
telling me.
For me, it's very much about the future. I think of him as a very kind of resilient human who has thought about the future.
Where is he going? He's not going anywhere.
Well, you don't necessarily have to.
Die eventually. He does on the screen. He basically goes
You don't necessarily. Yeah, I know. He disappears into
black.
black, but the black is full of possibility. For me.
Did you intend for the last shot for that to transform into the view, morph into the view through the window that we see earlier in the movie? It becomes that kind of image almost. That's what I saw. The man becomes the environment that he's in.
Well, I wanted the last image to be, firstly, an opportunity to just look at his face, which I think is wonderful and full of the past in a way. But I wanted this to kind of disappear, his face to disappear into the blackness, and the kind of grain of the film, and to kind of become part of, really, part of the film. And for me, I don't know. For me personally, I always thought of that as a possibility of what's going to happen, rather than a resolution. And when I think about him, I think about somebody who's not. Yeah, he thinks about the past, but he's also thinking about the future. But he's also made a decision about what his future is, which is to be in that place, which is the place that he's found himself most happy. Which seems like a pretty good idea. If you find happiness, then why? If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Is there in the second row there? Yeah.
Can you talk about your music choices? Because to me, the music was very evidently a marker of difference
Yeah, yeah. Which I mean, in a way, that points to your question as well. I mean, so the music is it does relate to his past, and it relates to the time when he was traveling before he decided to settle in this one spot. So the car that he drives around the forest to pick up the wood has these cassette tapes in, which are cassette tapes that he would buy in the market whenever the ship docked in India. So he would, they would dock in India, and then he would walk around the market and buy these tapes. And his only cassette player is in this car, so that's where those tapes usually live. And I really liked listening to them myself and thinking about how, what they did in that landscape, because they are really foreign. They're like they're alien to that space, that lush green northern forest, and you have this music that kind of wafts in from a very different kind of space. And I like that, and I like his decision to kind of keep that around as a kind of memory, I think, of what had got him there in the first place. And there's other bits of music. Well, there's a bit of music which it sounds foreign, but actually it's just on a homemade instrument that he made. So it's like a kind of twangy. It's when he's walking through the mist and then he falls asleep in the mist, and that's just him playing with a spoon on a metal wire. But maybe it points to his influence, his musical influences, which are very wide.
Is there another hand in the third row? Or no? One more question. The photos that he looks at different times, which obviously is a very loaded signifier in narrative terms, and your choice to include these. Are these real people in his life, or are these constructions of yours? But then beyond that, just the overall decision to have that sort of loaded signifier in the film.
I wanted to include some kind of clues to a previous life. Because the film is a moment between me and him, and I wanted there to be these kind of pointers to other people that had maybe been in his life or maybe hadn't. And one day he was out visiting a friend, and I was looking through all his photos, and I came across, most of them were color photos, and I came across this one small packet of black and white photos, and they were very mysterious to me because I was looking through them and I didn't know who these people were, and but I thought I maybe recognized a couple of them. And I liked the feelings that I was getting from looking through these private set of photos, which was a really eclectic bunch as well. It starts with this the eclipse of the moon. There's some kids, there's an old guy. And so, I filmed them and I cut them into the film. And then when I finally showed the film to Jake, he said he didn't know who all the people were, which, was great. And he was looking at them and saying, I can't remember, or this one is, I don't know them. And, in the end, that doesn't matter. What matters is the idea that these photos bring, I think.
And overall, since you talked about how you came to this originally through the reading of Knut Hamsun and so forth, but do you want to take a stab at what your attraction is to sort of, I don't know, I'll say for now, the romance of the hermetic existence, at least that isn't part of, I think, a spirit in several of your films, of course.
I guess it was just something that I grew up in the countryside, in a tiny village, and was very was very sort of fond of that way of life. But it's kind of hard to live like that as an artist and try to like get things done. And so I did the same as everyone else and moved towards the city. So I guess there was always this idea of like, what would it be like to live like that? So that's probably what brought me to Hampson and Jake in the first place, to just sort of think about like what that might mean in the 21st century. It's still an open question for me.
Any other last questions from any of you? Otherwise, I think we're about out of time in our space here as well. So I want to thank you all for coming. Ben will be at Red Cat tomorrow night with Los Angeles premiere of The Sky Trembled. Oh my God, I've
The sky trembles and the earth is afraid and the two eyes are not brothers.
And I highly recommend that to all of you. And thank you all for coming and hope to see you again soon. And thank you to Ben Rivers.